how do you know that you have the talent? How do you know that you don't? You know you could fail at every turn, but you take it anyway and you proceed with that conviction and you stick to it. And I think that can serve really well if applied right. If it's in the right direction, it will work. It really stood out to me, this one line from the research here, where he says that the most sublime thing that he's ever seen were the gardens around Kyoto, in Japan. Apparently he visited there as well. Something I just connect with that is the documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And it's all about this sushi chef who charges the highest price, I think, in the world for someone to sit, and he will make fresh sushi for someone. But it is a art, and it is a discipline where he's making like these powerful combinations of flavors. It's not just regular sushi. And the whole documentary, it was about the process and the content, the end result and the execution in order to achieve the end result, and the extreme discipline and commitment to the art and the craft of the making of the food. The scene that you see of this amazing sushi chef, it looks a lot like you would see if you walk into any restaurant, but the difference is in the experience of the person and the focus. And this is why, he's able to command a much higher price. But of course, it's not about that. It's about the commitment and the love of excellence, without frills. You see the same thing coming through in the Apple products. I mean, you look at, for instance, the iPad, and it's a screen with a button. It is ultimate simplicity. And I think there's actually a story in his biography by Walter Isaacson where he didn't even want the button on there. He had to fight with his team over it, and he ultimately decided with the team that it was better to have it there. Probably in the 90s, after the Pepsi executive kind of came over, took the reins, forced Steve Jobs to resign, basically fired him. I think it was probably in that time where they came out with a number of different products, and the company really just lost its way, and this created the whole need for Steve to come back and to basically turn around the company. It was a matter of weeks from bankruptcy, and he slashed and burned, but it wasn't with the intent of making a bold move. It was based on his conviction and his knowledge of what he believed and knew to work. And for the company to work in terms of getting back to profitability and a sustainable place where it was making sales, customers were happy, the company was profitable, and the company was able to do its best possible work, the company had to focus, and the company had to start saying no, 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 no.
The business aspects that he used to make Apple the way it is, like you were just talking about, focusing on usability and the user, making it simpler instead of trying to do more and more and more. He kind of just stuck to, and Apple still sticks to doing what they do best.
There's this clip of Steve standing on stage. He's addressing Apple employees, and one of the people in the audience asks him a question. It's a condescending, insulting question, highlighting the fact that Steve Jobs is not a developer, and so why is he declining to add this feature or this software? And so Steve takes a moment, he walks across stage, and he says, I don't know everything, but there are things that we have to say no to, and not everyone is going to be happy with that. But that is the importance of saying no to 1,000 great ideas in order to achieve one larger goal.
You can please some of the people some of the time. But one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? Some people will be pissed off. Some people will not know what they're talking about. But I think it is so much better than where things were not very long ago. And I think we're going to get there.
So Steve Jobs was a realist first and a dreamer second. He believed in his vision, and despite his brash style, he also listened to his team. He was tyrannical and ruthless in terms of his product philosophy, but he was also persuadable and rational regarding the final decisions on products in terms of what would add value to customers.
Clearly, he was highly creative, driven by emotion, highly intelligent as well. As far as coming back to product development, that type of mindset, I think, is important to have. In reality, you might have a conviction, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're right. Like, you can be an asshole like Steve Jobs. I mean, if you have the ability and the intelligence to back it up, and he later recognized too, when he came back to Apple, and especially at the end of his life when he got cancer and then he knew he was going to get sick again or was getting sick, he recalibrated a bit. He publicly talked more about, some of his, negative traits in the past or behaviors, and he worked to build Apple into a company that could survive without him and was not just going to be solely dependent. He made certain changes and had important discussions within the company at the time, and that's the evolution of his character arc. So I think that being ruthless can be really, really good, but it reminds me a little bit of Charles Bukowski was a fiction writer. There's this kind of hidden gem of him speaking online. It's just a clip where he was interviewed, and one of his most famous quotes is this quote, "Don't try," meaning like kind of just be yourself and own it. But in this interview, he talks about, how do you know that you have the talent? How do you know that you don't know? So you take a shot, but you do it with a certain awareness of, if you're being smart, you know the truth, you could fail at every turn, but you take it anyway and you proceed with that conviction and you stick to it. And I think that can serve really well if applied right. If it's in the right direction, it will work. I'm skeptical of how it will go, because do people really want to walk around with this strapped to their head? Especially can they do it all day? I think it has some really interesting features. I think they've really solved certain problems other headsets have not. It looks like it's more comfortable, it's sleeker, and undoubtedly they've gone through phases to get to where they are now. But I think that if Steve Jobs were still alive, I think you would have seen something like this for an internal prototype. I don't believe that he would have allowed this current version to be released as is. I think he would have seen the Wire as a compromise to the minimalist design philosophy. And I think he might have said to everyone, look, we're going to do a new revolutionary user interface, user experience device, but it's going to be this big. And they would have said, well, no, it can't happen because you can't fit that much hardware into this. And he would have said, tough shit, figure it out.
Yep. But it is in line with how Apple is as a business, like you were talking about. It's more expensive, it's sleeker, and functions like any other Apple would.
The simplicity in terms of their design philosophy is definitely there. And just optimize the experience. That seems pretty easy for clicking. And I think that they're clearly leading some sort of a path. They're potentially building a whole user experience here that is for the future. One thing that we didn't talk in more depth about was the cost of saying yes. I think that is just as applicable, because it's the opposite of saying no. Saying yes means commitment, means you have therefore an obligation, otherwise you don't have credibility if you commit to something and don't do it, or you have less credibility. And so being ruthless in that sense, I think of knowing whatever it is you're committing to is equally important, because I think it helps to the yes and the obligation that comes with that helps to define the benefits and drawbacks of no just as well. So it's like a mirror reflection. I think as far as mindset, behaviors, and approach, it's really easy to deify or glorify, the story arc of Steve Jobs and say, okay, it worked for Steve Jobs, therefore, as an entrepreneur, I should be a jerk more of the time or be ruthless or whatever. I think that in part, Steve Jobs was very successful, like a lot of other entrepreneurs, because there are multiple ways to win. There's not just one way, but I think his worked because he was also a realist. He knew at the end of the day, he believed so fundamentally in his philosophy, no button on the iPad. But ultimately, he did listen to his team when they, argued about it, and they added things like that on in the end, because he was a realist and he was also persuadable. So I think that is underlying some of the more theatrical stories and anecdotes about Steve Jobs as this kind of mixed reputation person, both someone who is ruthless, someone who is a visionary, and uncompromising. I think you have to just kind of take it all and see what parts are applicable and when to your journey as an entrepreneur, as a marketer. So how would an agency actually apply the lessons here? Are these anecdotes and lessons and insights about how Steve Jobs had this philosophy, was ruthless in applying it to Apple? Does this apply to an agency, to a service type of business? And I would say yes, because especially with service businesses, the product, the offer is whatever you say it is. And this is one of the big advantages that service businesses have over product businesses, is you could just snap your fingers tomorrow, put up a new landing page, or just change your landing page and say, okay, like this is what we offer now. You don't have to build anything new. You just have to change what the headlines or the copy says, for instance. But where a lot of service businesses go wrong, it reminds me of the quote from David Packard, co-founder of HP, Hewlett-Packard: "You're more likely to die of indigestion of too much opportunity than of starvation for too little." And that connects perfectly back to Steve Jobs' philosophy on the importance of saying no and the cost of saying yes, because the cost of saying yes as a service company, as I have seen firsthand when we were an agency, was, we were first, design focused, and then we were design and development, and then eventually we transitioned to be focused pretty well on just web marketing and digital marketing before we became productized and more like a product, which is what we are today. During that time period, we took on projects that we were not, it was just too much. We were spread way too thin. And you need to have some sort of a framework for helping yourself decide. It could be as simple as having a journal to reflect and being aware of when, because there's a real big temptation with clients. You just want to say, yes, I can do it. Yes, I want to take on this extra revenue, but not all dollars are created equal. So just because the client says, can you do this for me? Can you change your business and do this custom thing that you haven't done necessarily for other clients and do it really well for me? There's a cost to that. It's not just the gain of the revenue. And that's important, I think, to keep in mind for service companies, especially, for example, agencies. And that's one way that you can apply some of the insights from this video essay and article. We hope that you guys enjoyed this discussion. Let us know if you like this format. If you do, give it a like, subscribe, and please share it. And if you're interested in growing your business by delegating, well, with AutoGrow, you can delegate anything that you can imagine in terms of digital marketing, whether it's copywriting, design, development, ads, and so much more, up to 16 different skill sets. Go to autogrow.co, check us out. We have a $7 for 7-day trial to get started. We make it really easy. And our interface is super minimalist, in part thanks to Steve Jobs. Check us out at autogrow.co, and thank you so much.